allow me to take you guys on a journey. Let me give you guys a break from our usual programming to showcase the beauty that is the car culture of Japan through the lens of my camera. So we've got a bunch of things. And this trip, I swear, this trip has been years in the making. I had to plan my way through this trip very, very, very carefully in order to arrive at this point. And currently, we are in Shibuya City in Tokyo, Japan. Now, this is only the first leg of the trip. We're not just going to be keeping on inside of Tokyo, but we're also going to be renting cars and going on a road trip. But before we do that, we're going to check out the scene. We're going to go to car meets. We're going to go to one of the biggest aftermarket auto shows in the world, Tokyo Auto Salon 2025. And we're going to have a hell of a lot of fun doing it. So join me as we venture through Japan.
Nissan Crossing is located in Ginza in Tokyo, and it was only a few train rides away from our hotel, so we decided to check things out. The first thing we were able to see was the Nissan Hyperforce, an all-electric hypercar that features Nissan's E-Force all-wheel control technology. With that badge in front, one could guess what this model will be in the future. Upstairs, we were able to see the T-Spec Nissan GTR and a Datsun 2000. Plus, a cafe that served us some fun latte art with a zero top. After our short crossover to Nissan Crossing, we were able to explore the city a little bit until nightfall came. And a little bird told us to head to Daikoku PA, or Daikoku Parking Area, a must-visit for car enthusiasts who are in Japan. You'll need a car to get here though. Be like us and rent a Nissan Serena.
So now we're at the most exciting part of the trip. This is where we'll rent all of our cars. And look, it's ready. We're ready. So a little bit about this. So I've rented a Nissan Silvia S15 Spec R. Meanwhile, a friend of mine has rented a R33 GTR. And then we have a Fairlady Z. And finally, a friend of ours rented a Suzuki Swift Sport. Now, the other part about it is that we have another part too for this. So there is going to be a Toyota 86 and a Mazda RX-8, which is weird because they're both not here yet, so they must be rented out now.
So after picking up my rental, my friends and I immediately headed over to Nissan Zama Heritage Museum in Yokohama, which was about an hour and a half drive away from the rental place. Yippee. And it didn't really take that long. It was actually a pretty far drive, but yeah. Thanks to Japanese efficiency, we were able to get there in a very modest amount of time. The Nissan Heritage Museum is home to hundreds of historically significant vehicles dating as far back as the 1920s. A lot of the cars here are part of Nissan's own private collection, but a bunch, as I'm told, were purchased from other owners. Some favorites of mine include the progenitor to the fabled Nissan GTR line, a line that we all know and love today. The legend started out with the Prince Skyline, a nameplate that Nissan adopted into its lineup after taking over the Prince brand in 1966. In 1969, the first Nissan Skyline went into production and on sale, and the rest, as they say, is history. Of course, I had to check out the Silvia lineup while I was there, which also included the model's progenitors. And I really hope that Nissan gets a chance to bring back the Silvia nameplate just like how they kept the GTR and the Nissan Z alive all this time. Speaking of the Z, and backtracking a little bit, while the yellow model on the outside looks exactly the same that Kako, Jack, and I reviewed, well, about a year ago, the yellow one parked outside is actually the Z Proto, the exact model we saw in the grand unveiling back in 2020. And of course, we got to see the entire Z lineage inside, which included the likes of the Type 380 RS to the brand new RZZ34 Nismo. But perhaps the most impressive part of Zama was all of the race cars and test beds present. Most of the cars at the museum ran, and they're sometimes sent out of the museum for Nissan to display at events. And on this particular day, I was able to see an extremely rare GTR, the Nismo 400R. And this very unit was used as Nissan's test bed for all of the other units. And how many, you may ask? Well, in existence and as of recording, there was only 44 units of this model that was ever produced. It had 400 horsepower, and it was ridiculous back in the late 90s for a street legal production car, which came from a 2.8 liter turbo inline 6 with a red line of 9,000 RPM. Nissan brought this car out just for us to see, and we even got to open its doors and touch all of the preserved details of this historic machine. And you can probably guess just how funny it was to see my hoodie matching the exact body color of the 400R. After our Nissan culture shock in Zama Heritage, we were called back to Tokyo because yet another little birdie told us that there was yet another meet. Now, the reason why there's so many meets here is because it is the Tokyo Auto Salon week, which is an open invitation to some of the most influential and most enthusiastic car people from all over the world. And this was only one of the meets that were planned throughout the week. Now, we couldn't go to all of them, but this was kind of special. But before we headed to all of the other meets and all of the other fun stuff, work. But not really. Tokyo Auto Salon is the biggest gathering of local and international brands in Japan. For a car enthusiast, this place is the mecca of freebies, merch, and culture as far as the eye can see. There were a total of 11 halls reserved for the show alone, and I think you can guess just how tired we all were after everything was said and done. But of course, we had to visit our friend's booth in typical AutoDeal fashion. Bear with the shaky footage because believe me when I say there was a lot of pushing and a lot of people on opening day, and it was extremely hard to get good shots of the stuff there. At the Nissan booth, one particular car caught my eye first, and while it may look like Seiran blue, it is actually Wangan blue. Inspired by the Bayside blue of the Nissan R34 Skyline GTR, Nissan showcased its latest hue on the Z. Alongside it was the Nismo Ariya and the Nismo GTR, the usual suspects in Nissan's enthusiast range shows. The brand even brought out the GT500 Nissan Z race car as a big flex on the crowd. The most interesting showcase, however, was the Nissan R32 EV, a legacy model with a brand new set of electric bits. It's definitely not going into production, but it's Nissan's nod to continue its drive in keeping in touch with its heritage while moving forward with technology. The other eye-catching display at the salon, quote-unquote, was Mazda, having just unveiled the production version of its Mazda Spirit Racing Roadster 12R. This is the high-performance version of the ever-loved MX-5 that we've all been waiting for. This model takes the motorsports technology that Mazda developed from the Japan Super Type-U series and puts it in a production chassis. It's only limited, however, to just 200 units. It's priced at 7 million Japanese yen. And what you get for that is the exclusivity and a 2-liter gasoline engine that produces 200 horsepower, a Brembo braking system, upgraded Bilstein suspension, and a set of Advan Nova tires to make everything stick. Now, speaking of forbidden fruit, Suzuki was present with Suzuki Swift Sport, a model that me and my friends have been dying to get our hands on. And it's considered to be one of the most fun ways to get around the corner, but alas, it's not available in the Philippines. So to distract myself from my grief, I decided to look at the Suzuki Katana, which was colored the same way as the Swift, and then I got promptly distracted by a bunch of other interesting Japanese market models like the Franks, the Bandit, and the Solio. Oh, and of course, a Jimny. Who doesn't love a good Jimny at an auto show? And before you write off that Tokyo Auto Salon is an all-Japanese affair, wait up, here's BYD and Hyundai just chilling. At the BYD booth, we saw some familiar fascias all around. Just like the Philippines, BYD is breaking into the Japanese market and actually making quite a splash. And it's nice to see some familiar faces like the seal and the dolphin, but the question was, how well will BYD do in a country like Japan? Only time will tell. And last but not least, we have Hyundai. So how do you market your performance brand to a market that essentially pioneered performance tuning? While you go to the castle, the Drift King Keiichi Tsuchiya has recently come on as an ambassador for the N brand in Japan. Hyundai was so ecstatic that they made an Ioniq 5N Tsuchiya edition with the King's signature green accents in place of the red of the standard model. Now, I wish I had more time to cover the AutoSalon, but our group actually had another meet to attend on the same night, which was the Peaches X Underground Tokyo Meet. There's so many meets, man! So after all was said and done, after all the meets and all the shows and all the brands and all the cars, it was finally time for us to embark on our grand tour. The first stop was Enoshima Kamakura, a holiday destination for locals similar to our Subic or our Baguio or our La Union. We spent the night here and visited some shrines, but it was only a setup for the drive to come.
Oh, and by the way, that's Mount Fuji. So this is the Nissan Silvia S15 Spec R. Now, I love this car a lot. Ever since I was a kid, I used to play it in video games. I'd always choose it to become my car for maybe a good amount of races. And then after that, it would be off to bigger things. However, I've always had a soft spot for this car because it's not a GDR. It's not a Z. Well, right beside me is a Nissan Z, but it's that kind of underdog. It's that entry-level dude that, just chilling, just being a chill dude now, like the kids are doing nowadays. Anyway, I digress. So I'd like to actually take you through a tour and a quick little walk around in the blistering cold of this Nissan Silvia S15 Spec R. I don't know what year it is. We usually say the year, but whatever. Now, before... Oh God, that's cold. That's cold. Oh, that's cold. Before we get into... Okay. Now, before I get to the rest of the car, I just want to show you the engine first. And that is an SR20 DET, a late model version. So this is a dual overhead cam, 2-liter with a turbocharger. And this thing is their top of the line 4-cylinder. And it makes about 250 horses when it was new. The odd thing is, like most modern cars that make a certain number of horsepower, we'll see that their torque is much higher. However, in this case, it's roughly the same. You get about 210 Newton meters of torque in this thing, which is not bad, honestly, for the time, because every other Japanese car without a turbo basically made this little torque. Anyway, I've been liking this engine a lot. However, a few things are not really up to spec, like the VTC is broken, which is a common problem that most Silvia owners encounter back in the Philippines and around the world, actually, which leads them to just take it out and just run a normal setup. However, I am loving this engine. It is crazy how this boy has been chugging along for so long. And I'll tell you more about how long this car has been on the road in a little bit. But first, I'm just gonna break my fingers off because it's so freaking cold. The exterior of the Nissan S15 Silvia is, well, for me at least, timeless. It is that turn-of-the-century design where you get front headlights that look rather aggressive, and then you also get body lines that are rather smooth. It blends the modern sensibility with the old sensibility. A few curves here and there to keep things aerodynamic, but then at the same time, a few cuts and a few little creases down the side just to give it that extra bit of edge against its other competitors. The Silvia comes with 16-inch wheels with I don't know how thin tires. It's too cold to even check. I don't know what even the OEM size was. This could be different. I could be wrong. You get a 4-piston caliper up front and sliding calipers at the rear, which is a brake setup which was actually quite advanced for a car of this class.
Moving over to the rear, you also get a nice spoiler, which came with this variant of the Nissan Silvia. The other bit about this car that I like a lot is not the color. There have been other colors which were made available to this model, when my personal favorite would be the yellow one. But the white one, it's fine.
Now, modern cars usually come with buttons here on the trunk or whatever, but this one is a key. So, and I don't have the exact figures for you right now. That's pretty much all the trunk space you're gonna get here. And it served me pretty well. It fits my big maleta really well. So yeah, if you ever think of using a Silvia as a daily driver, it is totally possible with the amount of trunk space that you get. But if you're thinking about traveling with it, you might have to limit your passengers or your luggage. Now, speaking of passengers, show you the rear. So, seating behind, oh no, this was a mistake. Seating behind my normal driving position, yeah, are so much bigger now. For example, I could sit comfortably behind Kako or Jack, behind a Mustang, behind a GTR, behind me, well, not behind a Toyota GD86 or Subaru BRZ. This thing is absolutely freaking tiny, which brings me to note that if you were a passenger back here, you would be robbed dearly of your trip because there is just no leg room. I'm hitting the head already. I'm hitting the roof already with my head, and it's just a little bit cramped. Now you can ask your front passenger to quickly go in front and move the seat. I can't even reach it. It's so cramped in here. But hey, in terms of toys back here, you get a dome light, which is old and yeah, and you get a black headliner, which is cool. But you also get the speakers back here because there's literally no other place to put it on the sides. And on the sides, you get a huge cubby space. Like, look at this. This is a 2-liter ball, pretty much bigger than what we usually carry, and it fits. And plus, there's a lot of space there. You can put even a cap or whatever. Now, I do know that you won't use the back so much. I've been using this for my luggage, for my little carry-ons. And it's okay, really. I think that this, if you're just limiting yourself to 2 passengers, it will be good. Now, let's get up to the front here. So now I'm in my current driving position. This is my sportier driving position. If I wanted to relax a little bit, I'd just recline maybe one tooth back, and yep, we have liftoff. Anyway, so this is the interior of the Nissan S15 Silvia, and I am wholly in love with it. This is my favorite rendition of the Silvia ever. The last one before they cut the name out of the lineup. The pedals are also important, and there are 3 of them. This is actually a 6-speed manual. So the 6-speed is not fondly loved by enthusiasts because once you start modifying it, it starts to kind of boom. But for stock power, this is totally fine. And I've been getting very good fuel economy this entire trip, about 10, which is also good for a sports car of the time. Now, there are actually more air vents that you need here, but unfortunately, a problem with this car is also that they break. So on the flip side, however, there is automatic air control. The climate control here is fantastic. It's a Nissan. It's cold. Wait, it's already cold outside. Oh, it stays hot for a long time as well, and it's very reliable. Apart from that, yes, turn of the century styling. You get somewhat of that, more futuristic vibe with these vents. Nissan used to have square vents prior to this S15. So yeah, this one was a big leap forward in terms of design. As for your instrumentation, you get your speedometer on your left, you get your tachometer down the middle, as a sports car should be, and of course, your fuel gauge and your temperature gauge on the right hand side. So this is actually one of my favorite looking clusters of all time. Oh, and also there is a clock down the middle and also a trip computer, old school trip computer on the left hand side of your gauge cluster. That is fantastic. So all of my fuel economy readings have been using the yield calculator, well, on my phone. And finally, there's one gauge cluster that not even modern cars have thought to put in. which would be fantastic to see actually come make a comeback, and that is a boost gauge. Boost gauge. Anyway, other amenities include a 12-volt socket, which I have been plugging my trusty little charger into to keep my phone topped up. You have, of course, your old school handbrake here. Old school is good. You also have a whatever inch infotainment. I think it's a 7-inch infotainment screen. The thing is, this is not OEM. It used to come with like a button mash here, a mash of buttons in the middle, and of course you have your center console, which the lid is missing. That's actually a very common issue with these cars over the years. The clips here tend to break. And some people just leave it open or they just, never use it or whatever. I use it. There are two cup holders here, which are unfortunately Japanese size, so you can't fit any big water bottles here, as I will show now. Yep. Literally a square peg in a round hole. Literally and more. Like there's really no way. So the only way is to fit into that cubby hole there to keep myself topped up. There's also an ashtray, which is a very 90s thing. You know, maybe Kako would remember this. When did they stop putting ashtrays in cars? Why do I still remember that? I'm turning into Kako, aren't I?
As for my driving experience with this car, we took it up the mountains of Hakone. And what a sight to see. There was so much to see. There were so many twists and turns during our journey. And on top of that, the view. My goodness. Fuji showed itself in its grandiose glory on the mountain pass as we were driving. I couldn't imagine anything better. And there is so much great roads here in Japan that I just can't stop driving. Like, even during the nighttime, when I was just out and about with friends, I took the liberty of taking my camera and just shooting. However, I will note that it hasn't been the smoothest of sailing. Like, I have figured that there is a slight problem with my brakes, some just not me trusting them as much. And the steering alignment wasn't perfect either on this car. There's a bit of a tilt to the right. On top of that, the release bearing or the throwout bearing of the clutch is on its way out, but it's been serving me pretty well. And there are just shakes and rattles, just old car things. Now, I know that these sound like complaints, and I do tend to complain a lot, especially when reviewing newer cars. But since this is an older car, I can only imagine how good this actually handled back in the day. Now, if you look at it on the exterior, you wouldn't think that it actually had 231,000 plus kilometers on the clock. I think that for a car of this caliber, that is freaking fantastic. And by the way, it's a rental. So, of course, it was driven hard. Of course, it was driven long miles and kilometers. Look, there's no faster car than a rental car, as they always say. I think it was after the midpoint of our trip that things started to speed up, both literally and figuratively. Hours felt like minutes as we tracked over 1,000 kilometers and as our cars chugged liter and liter of premium fuel. Mind you, it's not that much more expensive than the Philippines, but still, kinda ouch. And on top of that, during the drive, toll fees piled up, but we didn't worry about it. Well, at least for now. We set our sights on Nagoya, where we spent one night, and then after that, we headed straight to Kyoto. Kyoto was a very cultural city for us, and we had a lot of cultural tours there. Whoa. Looks like there are boars at the precinct. Be careful, especially at nighttime. Okay, let's get out of here. But we also wanted to go further west. We eventually found ourselves in Osaka. Upon arrival, the tight city streets of Osaka were a stark contrast to the metropolitan expressways of Tokyo. Everything was easy in the east, but here, far out west, parking was kind of difficult, but kind of made easy thanks to the hotel we were staying at. It even had a little mechanical parking garage, which kind of made the cars feel like toys. Well, they kind of are, but they're serious toys. So we've reached the last leg of our trip. We're currently in Osaka, getting ready to leave for Tokyo. Um, so far we've done 1,600 kilometers plus getting here, and that includes Tokyo, going to Kamakura, Enoshima, then to Lake Kawaguchi. Then after that, we went to Kyoto, and after that, Osaka. But apparently, our flight's all the way back in Tokyo. So, yeah, a lot more driving to do. Well, that's pretty much almost the end of our trip, really. We're just gonna spend one more night in Tokyo, wait for our flight, and head back to the Philippines. So that kind of wraps everything up. Okay, time to drive. And so, our journey to the west ends, and our journey back to Tokyo began. And up to this point, and because of a few mishaps along the way, the car and I have accumulated about 1,700 kilometers driving around Japan. And now it was time for the last leg of the journey, a 500-kilometer trip back to where we started.
And we're off. So if y'all were wondering how I get my POV shots, part of me also wanted to prove that you don't really need a van to get through Japan. I mean, like, you know, with a bit of brain power, you can sort of sort your luggage around here. And if you're willing to drive alone or maybe with just one passenger, you can definitely make do. If you want to be comfortable, I'd recommend you rent something a little bit bigger than this because it is one of its downfalls. It's an old car. It has rickety arthritis everywhere, so the chassis has creaks and rattles a little bit. But for a 20-plus-year-old machine, it's not really that crazy to think that it can still kick ass and take some names. And now going to the end of our trip, we have accumulated a total of 9 kilometers per liter. Yep, mixed highway, city, and everything. Long road trip, short city bursts, everything. I will say that I expected this car to do a little worse because, again, old car, not really in the most fuel efficient to begin with. It has a turbo, and it has an idiot driver like me who has a bit of a lead foot. But for all intents and purposes, with 6 gears up in this transmission, it did exceedingly well. Actually, it kind of matched modern 6-cylinder vehicles like the Toyota Supra and the Nissan Z, in fact. Me and my other friend, the one who rented the Z, he actually has the same fuel economy figures that we got in our review. You can check that out. Now, one of the other interesting things here in Japan is that you actually have to pump your own gas. I've done it countless times before, but how it works is that you put in a credit card or you put in an amount of money, and then after that, you can click fill or you can click a set amount. Now, I don't know with you, but I usually put in the credit card just because I don't want to deal with change. But at the same time, yeah, it gets quite expensive. It's not as expensive as you think. Maybe a wee bit more compared to the Philippines. Like, let's say about few pesos more, maybe 5 pesos more or something like that for a premium fill. But really, not so much different. I'm spending just a modest amount of gas money more than I would back home. Anyway, we're gonna be logging in another 5 hours on the road, and it's now 3 o'clock. Yikes! Also, we have about 420 plus kilometers left to drive. So, yippee! All right, rest stop 2 done. 293 kilometers left. 3 hours and 30 minutes left of non-stop highway driving. So we just had a fuel check now, and it's dark as heck, so I'm gonna turn on the light. We just had a fuel check right now, and I just hit 3/4. The GDR, the GD86, and then the Nissan Z, all are a slight tick below 3/4. I, on the other hand, am just just touching the bottom of the needle of 3/4. So I'm good. all the way until Tokyo. Let's go. Though we might have to stop for gas for that guy. Mr. RX-8 over there is, well, middle of 3/4 and 1/2. So he's just a little over a half tank. So third stop done. Final stretch to Tokyo. We have about an hour 24 to go and 115 kilometers left to travel. Let's go. Last gas stop. Let's go, boys. Gassing up one more time. Head back to Tokyo. As for me, I'm at half tank and I've traveled 311 kilometers. Let's go. I'm gonna compute my fuel economy right now. So we finished our last gas stop and I recorded 10 point, what? 10.89, almost 11 kilometers per liter. Yeah, boy. This is econo car. It's an econo car now. Yeah, boy. Just had to have no traffic, be in another country and everything. It's good. It's all good. Oh boy. Gas is expensive here though. The last day. Oh man, it's the last day. Hey. Bye bye car. We're going home. We're going home. I'm sorry. Goodbye. So that's that. I'm kind of sad that I have to leave it here. But I think I'm gonna be even sadder walking back because unfortunately every adventure has to come to an end and I have to go back to the Philippines and see Kako and Jack again. I got them some gifts though, so I hope they like it.